The crimson sky of Velthra burned like a dying star as Admiral Hyan-Woo Kim gripped the metal railing of his bridge. The Soul's Pride cut through space like a knife, her hull gleaming with fresh Earth-forged steel. Around him, 46 other human ships pushed their engines to the limit, chasing a signal that had changed everything. 3 months ago, Lieutenant Ji-hoon Park had been monitoring deep space frequencies from Luna Station when the transmission hit Earth sensors like a thunderbolt. The message was broken, desperate, filled with static that made translation nearly impossible. But the computers had worked for weeks, piecing together fragments of an alien language no human had ever heard. Double quotes, please, ... anyone. The hegemony comes. Our children ... extinction approaches. Coordinate 7-7-alpha ... help us. The message wasn't meant for Earth. It was bouncing off ancient relay stations, searching for allies across the galaxy. But somehow, through pure chance, it had reached humanity's primitive radio telescopes. Commander Hyan-Woo remembered the heated debates in the Defense Council. Earth had just mastered faster-than-light travel 6 months earlier. Their ships were crude compared to what the aliens might possess. Most politicians wanted to ignore the transmission entirely. It's not our fight, they had argued. We don't even know these aliens exist. But Hyan-Woo had stood before the assembly and played the recording again. In the background static, you could hear something that needed no translation. Children crying, mothers calling for their young, universal sound of families facing death. "Sir, dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced Lieutenant So-Young Park. Her hands steady on the navigation controls despite the tension crackling through the bridge. She was barely 25, fresh from the academy, but she had volunteered immediately when the fleet was assembled. The Soul's Pride shuddered as reality reasserted itself around them. Stars shifted back into focus, and dead ahead lay a sight that made every human heart skip a beat. Velthera hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its surface dotted with massive cities that gleamed in the light of twin suns. But surrounding the planet was a sight from humanity's worst nightmares, a fleet of alien warships so vast it defied comprehension. "Jesus Christ," whispered Navigator Taeyong Kim, belicidizable over the bridge's electronic hums. "Captain," Minho Lee's voice crackled through the communication array from the destroyer Busan Thunder. "Admiral, my sensors are going crazy. I count over 200 enemy vessels, and they're all bigger than anything we've got. Some of those ships are 5 kilometers long." Ooh. Through the main viewport, Hyan-Woo could see the alien fleet's formation. The ships were sleek and predatory, their hulls a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved with perfect coordination, like a school of mechanical sharks circling wounded prey. Sir So-Young's voice was tight with controlled fear. "I'm detecting massive energy discharges from the planet's surface. The cities, ... they're being bombarded." The tactical display lit up with red markers as plasma beams lanced down from the alien fleet, turning entire city blocks into glass. Even from this distance, they could see the atmosphere glowing where the orbital bombardment struck. "Those bastards," growled Captain Sung-Min Choi from the cruiser Incheon's Rage. "They're not just conquering the planet, they're exterminating everything on it." Hyan-Woo closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his daughter's face when he'd left Earth. She was only 12, still believed her father could solve any problem. What would she think if she knew he was about to lead humanity's entire fleet against impossible odds? "Admiral," came another voice over the Come Captain Hajin song from the frigate Daegu's honor. "My crew is ready. We didn't come all this way to turn back now." The truth was, Earth's politicians had finally agreed to send the fleet not out of nobility, but out of fear. If aliens were conducting genocide somewhere in the galaxy, humanity needed to know what they were dealing with. Better to make contact on their own terms than wait for these killers to find Earth on Velthera's surface. The blue-skinned Zelthani huddled in underground shelters as their world died above them. They had sent their desperate message to the stars hoping their allies would answer. Instead, their quantum communicators had malfunctioned, broadcasting on primitive radio waves that no advanced civilization monitored anymore. But humans were still primitive enough to listen to radio. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim, Hyan-Woo. spoke into his headset, his voice carrying across 47 bridges. 3 months ago, we heard someone crying for help. Today, we answer that call. We're outgunned and outnumbered, but we're human. We don't abandon people who need us. The Terran Defense Fleet powered up their weapon systems. Their nuclear missiles and railguns pathetic compared to the alien technology ahead. But they moved forward anyway, because somewhere below families were dying. The blue-skinned Zelthani, refugees pressed against bunker windows, watching in amazement as unknown ships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls bearing the strange symbol of a small blue world called Earth. General Dexmore stood 8 feet tall on the command deck of his massive dreadnought Death's Embrace. His gray skin was covered in ritual scars, each one marking a species his Corvanian hegemony had wiped from existence. For 300 years they had swept across the galaxy like a plague, destroying any civilization they deemed inferior. Zelthani had been particularly easy prey. Their peaceful nature made them weak. Their technology focused on healing rather than killing. Dexmore had expected them to surrender after the first orbital bombardment, but these blue-skinned creatures kept fighting from their underground bunkers. General hissed his tactical officer, Commander Vextel, "Unknown vessels are approaching our perimeter." 47 ships, primitive design. Dexmore's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. The approaching ships looked crude, their hulls thick and clunky compared to the sleek Corvanian vessels. "Probably scavengers hoping to pick through the ruins," he growled. "Send the standard warning." The communication array crackled to life, broadcasting on all frequencies with the authority of absolute power. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves. Immediately, you're interfering with a hegemony cleansing operation. Withdraw or be destroyed." On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Admiral Hyanwu felt sweat beating on his forehead. Mechanical filled with harsh mechanical, filled with the cold certainty of a predator. Through the viewport, he could see the massive enemy dreadnought, a black mountain of metal, bristling with weapons that could vaporize his entire fleet. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant So Young, "their lead ship is 12 kilometers long, our biggest ship is barely 800 meters. Hyanwu stepped forward to the communication console. His hands were steady, despite the fear gnawing at his stomach. "This is Admiral Kim Hyanwu of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received a distress call from this system. Withdraw your forces immediately and allow the civilians to evacuate." Silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then cruel laughter echoed across space, a sound like grinding metal that made every human shiver. "Terrans." General Dexmore's voice dripped with amusement. "We have no record of your pathetic species in our databases. You will witness the complete cleansing of these inferior Zelthani, then serve the hegemony as slaves. Primitive ships will make adequate target practice for our gunners." Captain Nari Choi's voice cut through the communication channel from her cruiser engine's fury. "Admiral, with respect, we didn't travel 600 light-years to watch innocent people get murdered." "I concur," added Captain Jaezoon Park. "From the battleship Bizon's Wrath, my crew is ready to show these aliens what humans do to bullies." On the surface of Velthera, Zelthani families huddled in deep shelters, listening to the exchange through their remaining communication systems. Elder Zeltara, leader of the survivors, translated the human words for her people. Many wept to hear someone, anyone, standing up for them. General Dexmore's amusement turned to irritation. "You dare threaten the hegemony? Your species clearly requires education in the natural order." Weapons Division. Target the lead vessel. Demonstrate our superiority. The dreadnought's main plasma cannon began to glow with building energy. The weapon was designed to crack planets powered by the compressed matter of dead stars. Around the Corvanian fleet, 200 warships turned their guns toward the tiny human formation. "All ships." "This is Admiral Kim." Hyanwu's voice carried across the fleet with calm determination. "They want to see what we're made of. Let's show them." The first plasma beam lanced out from the Corvanian dreadnought, a river of superheated matter that could melt asteroids. It struck the destroyer Daegu's Will dead center, and Captain Genesio Yoon's ship staggered under the impact. The human vessel's shields flared brilliant white before failing completely, Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. Owen's voice crackled through the static. We've lost main power, but we're still fighting. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for generations. Instead of retreating or trying to surrender, the human fleet scattered in all directions, their ships moving in patterns that defied all tactical logic. Captain Minho Lee's destroyer, Busan Thunder, dove straight down toward the planet's gravity. Well, using it to slingshot around and attack the Corvanian fleet's blind spot. Captain Hyjin Song's frigate Soul's Hammer launched every missile it carried, then immediately began ramming speed toward a Corvanian cruiser. What are they doing? Commander Vextel stared at his tactical display in confusion. They're using their own ships as weapons. Human tactics were insane by galactic standards. Damaged vessels didn't retreat for repairs. They accelerated toward enemy ships, turning themselves into guided missiles. Mining charges meant for asteroid operations became improvised torpedoes. Cargo containers were jettisoned and remotely detonated to create debris fields. Captain Sujin Han's corvette, Guangzhou's Hope, had lost half its crew and all its main weapons, but she wasn't finished. Engineering. Can you overload our reactor? Captain, that would destroy us, protested her chief engineer. Could plot a collision course with that battleship. If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us. The small human ship screamed. Through space, its hull glowing red-hot from damage. It struck the Corvanian battleship's command section like a bullet, both vessels erupting in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire battlefield. General Dexmore watched in growing horror as these primitive humans fought like cornered animals. They showed no fear, no tactical sense, no desire for self-preservation. When their ships were crippled, they used them as rams. When their weapons failed, they improvised new ones. Sir Vextel's voice was shaking. We've lost 14 vessels. These ... These humans are completely insane. Admiral Hyanwu stood on his damaged bridge, watching his fleet fight with desperate courage. They were losing ships faster than they could count. But they were also proving something important to the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they fought for strangers just as fiercely as they would fight for their own children. Commander Sujin. Han felt the deck plates vibrating beneath her feet as her corvette Guangzhou's Hope limped through space. Half her crew was dead, main engines were gone, and atmosphere was bleeding from a dozen hull breaches. But her eyes were locked on the massive Corvanian battleship that had just destroyed 2 human frigates. Commander, we've got maybe 3 minutes of life support left, reported Chief Engineer Wusong Kim, his uniform torn and bloody from the last impact. Main reactor is at 12% and falling. Sujin stared at the enemy vessel through the cracked viewport. The Corvanian ship was a monster, bristling with weapons and thick armor plating. Its command tower rose from the hull like a predator's head, scanning for new targets. All remaining crew, prepare for ramming speed, she announced over the ship's intercom. Her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Her first officer, Lieutenant Young-Hoon Park, grabbed her arm. Commander, you'll never survive the impact. We can still launch the escape pods. Sujin looked at him with eyes that held no fear, only determination. Young-Hoon, look at that battleship. See how it's positioning itself to bombard the evacuation sites on the planet? Those Zelthani children will die if we don't stop it. She gently removed his hand from her arm. Maybe we won't survive, but that Corvanian ship won't either. Through the tactical display, she could see Zelthani transport ships struggling too. Escaped the planet's atmosphere, packed with refugees. Blue-skinned families pressed against the viewports, watching the battle above with desperate hope. Engineering, give me every bit of power we have left. Divert everything to the engines. Commander. But at this acceleration, the reactor might go critical. That'll make the explosion bigger. Sujin gripped the helm controls, her knuckles white. For humanity and for the Zelthani. The Guangzhou's Hope shot forward like a missile, its dying engines screaming with overload. The Corvanian battleship tried to turn its massive bulk, but it was too late. The small human vessel struck the command section with the force of a meteor, punching through shields and armor before both ships erupted in a brilliant explosion that lit up half the star system. Captain Dong Hang Kong watched from his heavy cruiser Daigu's thunder as the fireball expanded, consuming both vessels. Around him, his bridge crew stood in stunned silence. The sacrifice was both horrible and inspiring. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer, "that's the 7th human ship to ram the enemy today. They're not fighting like any military doctrine I've ever studied." Dong Hayan nodded grimly. Human tactics were born from desperation and a refusal to quit. When their weapons failed, they used the ships themselves as weapons. When outnumbered, they split up and attacked from impossible angles. When facing certain death, they made sure to take enemies with them. The Corvanians were learning a hard lesson. Their military assumed that rational beings would surrender when defeat was certain. But humans didn't fight rationally, they fought with pure, stubborn determination. "Admiral." Lieutenant Yunji Song's excited voice crackled through the communication. "Array, the Zelthani are launching their remaining fighters to assist us." From hidden bases across Velthera's surface, sleek blue fighters rose into the void. They were smaller than human vessels, designed for speed rather than firepower. But their pilots flew with the fury of people defending their homes. Elder Zeltara herself piloted the lead fighter, her ancient hands steady on the controls. "All Zelthani pilots, these humans cross the galaxy to help us. We will not let their sacrifice be in vain." The blue fighters swarmed around the larger human ships, their energy weapons picking off Corvanian attack craft. They moved like dancers, spinning and weaving through enemy fire with incredible grace. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Commander Jamin Lim was discovering that space battles were only half the fight. Corvanian dropships had landed near the major evacuation sites, deploying ground troops to prevent any Zelthani from escaping. "Marines, sound off." Jamin called into his helmet radio as his assault shuttle touched down in a bombed-out city square. "Second squad, ready," came the reply from Sergeant Biera Yoon. "Third squad, locked and loaded," added Corporal Hyansik Lee. The Corvanian soldiers were nightmares made real 8-foot-tall creatures in powered armor, their weapons firing beams that could melt steel. But they had never faced human Marines who had trained for urban warfare. J-Min led his troops through the rubble, using destroyed buildings for cover. Beside them ran Zelthani defenders, tall, graceful beings with blue skin and large eyes that held fierce determination despite their peaceful nature. Commander called. Out Captain Zelenara, a Zelthani female, who carried an energy rifle almost as tall as herself. "The evacuation ships are trapped in the spaceport. Our children cannot escape while those monsters guard the landing platforms." Jamin studied the tactical situation through his visor. The Corvanian forces had positioned themselves perfectly, with overlapping fields of fire covering all approaches to the spaceport. It was a suicide mission. "Sergeant Yoon, take your squad around the east side. Lee, you're with me on a frontal assault." He turned to the Zelthani captain. "Can your people provide covering fire from the upper levels?" Zelenara's large eyes widened. "You mean to attack directly? That is certain death." "Maybe, but those are kids in there, right? Human or Zelthani, doesn't matter. Kids need protecting." What followed was a battle that would be remembered in both species' history. Human Marines and Zelthani defenders charged across open ground under murderous fire, their only goal to reach the trapped evacuation ships. Sergeant Bora Yoon's squad flanked the enemy position, her soldiers throwing themselves against Corvanian armor with grenades and determination. Corporal Hyansik Lee used his rocket launcher to blow open a path through the enemy lines. Even as alien plasma burned through his combat suit, the blue-skinned Zelthani children pressed their faces against the transport windows, watching in amazement as these strange newcomers from Earth threw themselves into impossible battles. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied understanding, buying precious time with their blood. Commander Jamin felt the heat of a plasma beam singe his helmet as he dove behind cover. Around him, the battle raged with desperate intensity. Through the smoke and chaos, he could see evacuation ships beginning to lift off, carrying Zelthani families to safety. it was worth any price. General Dexmore stared at his tactical display. In growing disbelief, in 3 centuries of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The primitive human fleet should have been annihilated within minutes, yet somehow they had cost him 37 warships and were still fighting. General Commander Vextal's voice trembled with barely controlled panic. The humans have destroyed our entire 3rd attack wing. They're using suicide tactics we've never encountered before. Through the viewport of his massive dreadnought, Dexmore watched in horror as another human destroyer accelerated directly toward a Corvanian battleship. The small vessel's engines glowed white-hot as it pushed beyond safe limits, its hull already glowing from enemy fire. Captain Youngman, Park's voice echoed across the communication channels as his ship Olsen's Revenge made its final run. This is for every innocent life you've taken, you bastards. The destroyer struck the Corvanian cruiser's reactor section and detonated in a controlled explosion that tore both ships apart. The shockwave rattled every vessel within 50 kilometers, a brilliant star of destruction that illuminated the battlefield. Impossible, Dexmore growled, his 4 eyes fixed on the carnage. They're turning their own deaths into weapons. What kind of species fights like this? On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Admiral Hyanwu gripped his command chair as another plasma barrage hammered his flagship. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Half his fleet was gone, but the surviving ships fought with desperate fury. Admiral called out Lieutenant So-Young Park, her uniform torn and face streaked with soot. Structural integrity is at 40%. We've lost main weapons, and life support is failing on decks 5 through 8. Hyanwu looked around his battered bridge. His crew was exhausted, wounded, but their eyes still burned with determination. Through the tactical display, he could see Zelthani evacuation ships escaping the planet's gravity well, packed with blue-skinned refugees. How many civilians have we gotten out? He asked. Approximately 3 million, sir. Maybe half the population. Half it wasn't enough, but it was something. Every life saved justified the price they were paying. Captain Minho Lee's voice crackled through the damaged communication system from his destroyer Busan Thunder. Admiral, my ship's about done for, but we've cleared a corridor for the last evacuation transports. The Zelthani children are getting away. Well done, Captain. All ships maintain defensive positions around the Sir. Young's voice cut through his orders, high and tight with stress. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures. 3 more Corvanian fleets approaching. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes. The bridge fell silent, except for the sparking of damaged electronics. Hyanwu felt his heart sink as the tactical display updated. 300 fresh enemy ships, all heading directly for their position. His remaining 22 vessels couldn't possibly stand against such numbers. Admiral whispered Navigator Tai-Young Kim, we could run. The evacuation ships are clear. We've done what we came to do. Hyanwu stared at the approaching enemy. Signatures. They could retreat, report back to Earth that they had saved some of the Zelthani. But 3 million people were still trapped on the planet below, hiding in bunkers and caves. If the humans ran now, those people would die. Negative. We hold position. Signal all ships to prepare for. Space suddenly erupted with new arrivals. Massive energy signatures appeared on the far side of the system as dozens of ships dropped out of hyperspace. But these weren't Corvanian vessels. Unknown vessels. This is Admiral Kim of the Terran Defense Fleet. Hyanwu broadcast on all frequencies, not sure if he was facing new enemies or potential allies. Immediately, the response came in perfect galactic standard, spoken with dignity and authority that carried across the void. Admiral Kim, this is Fleet Commander Geltar of the Galactic Alliance. We received your transmissions. The entire galaxy heard humanity's stand here today. The new arrivals were magnificent. Sleek vessels with hulls that seemed to bend light. Around them, each one a masterpiece of advanced engineering. There were tall, crystalline ships that belonged to the Ethereal Collective, organic-looking vessels from the Verdant Republic, and massive battle stations from the Iron Confederacy. Admiral Kim Geltar's voice continued. We are the Zelthani's true allies. Your species' distress call finally reached us. though it took time to mobilize our forces. We came as quickly as we could. Lieutenant So-young stared at her sensors. In amazement, sir, I'm counting 47 Allied vessels. Some of them are reading as Dreadnought class or larger. Through the communication channel, they could hear other voices joining the conversation. Captain Veltara of the ethereal ship. Crystal Dawn spoke with a voice like singing wind. Humans of Earth, your courage has inspired the galaxy. Today you stand with us as equals. Commander Torvus from the Iron Confederacy's battleship Eternal Forge added his deep, mechanical voice. Any species that fights for strangers as fiercely as you have fought deserves our respect and our aid. General Vexmore watched his tactical display as the new fleet took up positions around the human vessels. His confidence crumbled as he realized he was no longer facing 22 primitive ships, but the combined might of 6 different species. General Vextel's voice was barely a whisper. The Alliance fleet is powering up weapons. They're targeting our entire formation. Impossible, Vexmore snarled. The Alliance has never responded this quickly to a distress call. How did they? Because we heard something we had never heard before? Came Fleet Commander Jeltar S. Voice across the communication channels. We heard a species that had never met the Zelthani, willing to die for them. Your transmissions, your battles, your sacrifices, they were broadcast across every civilized world in the galaxy. Admiral Haiyan-Wu felt tears he hadn't realized he was shedding streak down his face. Round him his bridge crew was cheering, exhausted voices raised in triumph and relief. Admiral Jeltar continued, Would you do us the honor of standing with us as we drive these murderers from Zelthani space? Haiyan-Wu straightened in his command chair, looking out at the Allied fleet that had come to join their desperate fight. Fleet Commander, it would be our privilege. Let's finish this.
Yes.
Battle that followed was brief but decisive. The 3 arriving Corvanian fleets found themselves facing not just the surviving human vessels, but the full might of the Galactic Alliance. Energy beams and missile barrages lit up space as the combined fleet struck with overwhelming force. General Vexmore's dreadnought shuddered under the assault, its shields failing as Alliance weapons tore through its hull. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he gave the order that felt like poison in his throat. All ships, retreat. Withdrawal from the system? As the Corvanian fleet limped away into hyperspace, Admiral Haiyan-Wu stood on his damaged bridge and watched the stars. His fleet had lost 25 ships and over 1,000 crew members, but they had saved an entire civilization. More importantly, they had announced humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most human way possible by fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. General Vismos' massive dreadnought shook under the combined assault of 6 different alien fleets. His bridge crew scrambled at their stations as energy beams from the ethereal collective's crystal ships cut through his fleet's formation like hot knives through butter. The Iron Confederacy's massive battle stations unleashed torrents of molten metal projectiles, while sleek Verdant Republic ships fired living energy that seemed to hunt his vessels. General Commander Vextel's voice cracked with desperation. We're losing ships faster than we can count them. The Alliance fleet has us completely surrounded. Through the chaos, Dexmore could see the battered human vessels still fighting. Alongside their new allies, even with half their fleet destroyed, the Terrans kept firing their primitive weapons with stubborn determination. It was those humans who had somehow triggered this disaster, their desperate transmissions reaching across the galaxy to summon the Alliance. All ships emergency retreat. Dexmore snarled into his communicator. Full hyperspace jump now. The Corvanian fleet scattered like frightened animals, their ships disappearing into hyperspace rather than face an enemy that refused to surrender. For the first time in 3 centuries, the hegemony had been forced to flee from a battlefield. Fleet. Commander Jeltar's flagship, the magnificent Harmony's Edge, approached the smoking hull of the Soul's Pride. The Alliance vessel was a work of art, its hull crafted from living metal that shifted and flowed like liquid silver. Compared to the crude human battlecruiser, it looked like a swan next to a bulldozer. Admiral Kim Jeltar's voice carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. Permission to come aboard your vessel. The Galactic Council wishes to speak with you directly. Admiral Haiyan-Wu looked around his destroyed bridge. Half the control panels were dark, atmosphere leaked from a dozen hull breaches, and the smell of burned electronics filled the air. Fleet Commander, I'm not sure our ship is safe for visitors right now. Admiral, after what we witnessed today, I believe humans could survive anything. An hour later, Jeltar materialized on the Soul's Pride's bridge in a shimmer of light. The Alliance commander was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and eyes that held the depth of space itself. Despite the formal nature of the meeting, Jeltar immediately moved to help Lieutenant So-Young Park, who was struggling with a damaged console. "Allow me," Jeltar said, placing elegant hands on the human equipment. The console flickered back to life under his touch. "Your technology is remarkable. Crude, perhaps, but incredibly resilient." Admiral Hanwoo extended his hand in the universal human gesture of greeting. "Fleet Commander, I'm grateful for your arrival. We couldn't have held out much longer." Stared at the extended hand for a moment, then clasped it firmly. "Admiral Kim, the Galactic Council wishes to formally thank humanity. You answered a distress call that wasn't meant for you, sacrificed your people for complete strangers, and showed courage that puts the rest of us to shame." "We heard someone asking for help," Hyan-Woo replied simply, his voice heavy with exhaustion and grief for his fallen crews. "It was the right thing to do." Those words rippled across the Alliance fleet like wildfire. Like species that had known each other for millennia had never heard such simple, pure motivation. Most galactic civilizations helped their allies out of treaty, obligations, or political advantage. Humans had helped because it was right. On Velthera's surface, the real miracle was just beginning. The planet's major cities lay in ruins, but the people were alive. Zelthani families emerged from their underground shelters, their large eyes wide with wonder as they met their rescuers. "Commander," Jamin. Lim knelt beside a small Zelthani child who had been separated from her family during the bombardment. The little girl's blue skin was pale with shock, but she looked up at the human marine with curious eyes. "Hey there, sweetheart," Jamin said softly, removing his helmet to show his face.
"What?"
"What's your name?" The child spoke in her musical language, and a Zelthani translator quickly provided the meaning. "She says her name is Lalara. She wants to know if you're an angel." Jamin felt his throat tighten. Around him, other human Marines were sharing their rations with refugee families. While Navy medics worked alongside alien doctors to treat the wounded, Sergeant Bora Yoon had already started teaching Zelthani children how to play cards there. Laughter mixing with the adult conversations. "Tell her I'm just a soldier," Jamin said, "but tell her she's safe now." What followed would become legend across the galaxy. Human Marines began adopting Zelthani orphans, unable to bear the thought of leaving them behind. Navy engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged Zelthani infrastructure, while doctors developed new treatments by combining human and alien medical knowledge. Captain Minho Lee, his destroyer barely held together by emergency repairs, was coordinating the evacuation of the remaining civilians when his communication officer called out excitedly, "Captain, receiving a transmission from Earth." The message crackled through space, carrying the voices of billions of humans who had watched the battle through quantum relays. President Chen's voice was tight with emotion as she spoke to the fleet. "Admiral Kim, this is Earth Command. The entire planet has been watching your battle. We're proud of what you've done out there. When are you coming home?" Lieutenant So-Young Park smiled through her tears as she heard her home planet's voice. Around her, the surviving crew members of the Soul's Pride looked at each other with expressions of exhausted pride. Admiral Hyan-Woo stood at the bridge's viewport, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so empty. Allied ships from 6 different species worked alongside his battered fleet, sharing technology and offering friendship. The galaxy had changed in a single day. Lieutenant said to So-Young, "Tell Earth we'll be home soon, and tell them the galaxy knows about humanity now." The final tally was devastating and inspiring in equal measure. The Terran Defense Fleet had lost 25 ships and over 1,000 crew members. But they had saved an entire civilization and earned humanity a place among the stars. As rescue ships tended to the wounded and diplomats began the delicate process of first contact, the story of the human fleet's sacrifice spread across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth began asking questions about these strange newcomers who fought for strangers. Fleet. Commander Jeltar stood with Admiral Hyanwu on the observation deck of the Alliance flagship, watching as human and alien crews worked together to repair the damage. In the distance, Velthora glowed with the lights of rebuilding cities. Admiral Jeltar said quietly, "In all my years of service, I have never seen anything like what your people did here. Most species fight for territory, resources, or revenge. Humans fought for strangers, for children they had never met, for the simple principle that it was right." Hyanwu nodded, thinking of the crew members who would never see Earth again. "Fleet Commander, I hope we can build something good from this. The galaxy is a big place, and it seems like there are a lot of people who need help." "Indeed there are, Admiral. Indeed there are." As the joint human-alien fleet prepared to escort the Zelthani refugees to safety, one thing had become clear to every species in the galaxy. Humans had arrived, and they had announced themselves in the most human way possible by fighting. For those who couldn't fight for themselves, the universe would never be the same. The end.